Hi, this is Shauna. Before we get to today's guest, I want to take a minute to learn more about you, the listener. We've put together a short survey at fueltalent.com/podcast to gather information on who's listening and to give you a chance to make suggestions and comments about the show. I want What Fuels You to be a great resource for you and your interests, and I hope these interviews give you practical advice along with inspiration for your career and life. Help us continue to serve you better by going to fueltalent.com/podcast. Thank you so much. Now let's start today's show. Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Grant Ries. Grant is the CEO of DeepSync, a leading data and technology company in the marketing industry. Before DeepSync, Grant was a member of the executive leadership team at Liveramp, where he continues serving as a strategic advisor. During this time at the company, he held several roles, including CEO of Liveramp B2B, as well as running the following businesses: data, marketplace, advanced TV, and most recently as the executive VP of emerging markets. Grant joined Liveramp through the acquisition of Pacific Data Partners, a B2B data and technology company he co-founded. Prior to Liveramp, Grant co-founded and served as board member and chief revenue officer of BlueKai. When Oracle acquired BlueKai in 2014, Grant co-launched the Oracle Data Cloud, a global business unit, and served as its vice president. Grant currently serves on the board of directors of Mountain and Rembrand, is an active angel investor, and has provided advisory and operating support for his various investments in the technology sector for over 20 years. Welcome, Grant. So good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I'm so glad we finally did this. I'm going to hit you with rapid fire.
Okay.
This is one of my favorites. Like, what's your favorite thing to eat at the movies?
Popcorn.
Buttered popcorn?
And salt.
Butter and salt. What's your biggest pet peeve?
People making chewing noises when they eat.
I knew you were going to say that. That's so freaking weird. I was like, it's probably just perfectly correlated, like the person eating the loud popcorn at the movie.
It really creates a lot of problems for me, that the sound, if it's too close.
3 words that your friends would use to describe you. I know you've got a very tight group of friends and you hold on to your friends dearly. So how would they describe you?
I would like to think that they would describe me as loyal, helpful, and generous.
I would say I've known you for a long time, and I would say yes, yes, and yes.
Thank you.
Amen. Amen and amen. If you could be famous for something, which I know you wouldn't want, it's like your worst nightmare. But if you could be famous for something, what would it be?
Probably something in the sciences, like maybe figure out a way to stop a bunch of problems that are clearly happening for the planet.
That's so noble. I was more thinking you were going to be like Michael Jordan or something.
Well, if you could do anything, like
no, I'm literally like anything.
Who wouldn't want to save the world if they could?
Yes.
If they could literally do anything.
Yeah, that's true. So, like curing cancer or something.
Anything in science, I think that would probably be helpful. It'd be helpful, and plus you get to be famous anyway for it. So
yeah,
good legacy. Yeah.
Is there an app that you use daily that you can't live without?
Other than communication apps like email, and I look at, this is funny, I look at food photos on Yelp a lot.
Food photos?
Yeah, from different restaurants.
Oh God. Like, because you're trying to think about which restaurant to eat at, or it's just more like inspiration?
Yeah. It's part of my restaurant due diligence, because for example, a pizza, just seeing the description of pizza doesn't work. You have to see what it looks like. There's a lot of different.
So Yelp has I don't even look. I'm the worst.
Yeah, they have a lot. Most of the restaurants have lots of food photos that people upload.
Okay. Well, this is good to know. What was the first concert that you ever went to or saw or remember?
Bruce Springsteen in fifth grade.
Oh,
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah, at the Tacoma Dome.
Is there a sport that is like the sport you most enjoy watching?
Tennis by far.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Have you been to any of the Grand Slams?
I have. I've been to the US Open a couple times. Those night matches are incredible. And my bucket list is to go see Wimbledon someday and also the French Open.
Okay, we're going to go. This actually gives it away that we've known each other for a very long time. We're both original Seattleites, like some
Yep.
of the very few. But we didn't know each other when we were little. Like, tell me about your earliest memories being from here.
I grew up in Bellevue, and I describe it to people that aren't from Seattle as basically there was this mall in the middle of downtown Bellevue, and it was like every other mall in America with an Orange Julius in the and you just go in Pizza Haven and you just walk around. Like in the summer, your parents would drop you off, and you just walk around the mall and cruise around and go into all the really, really nice stores like J. Jacobs and look at clothes that you couldn't afford to buy.
And I was in there selling the clothes, so we probably
right.
did meet.
Totally, probably.
I worked at Bell Square. I had to park in the distance where the employee lot.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And then it was that and going over to the Bellevue Athletic Club and swimming and playing tennis.
So what were you into back then as far as sports? It was swimming and tennis?
No, I was the worst swimmer ever. As a matter of fact, I tried out for the swim team, and it was a pretty horrible experience. I was.
Is there such a thing as getting cut from the swim team?
I'll tell you what happened. We were all lined up. It was an Olympic-sized pool, the indoor pool, huge pool, and there's I don't know how many slots there are, tons of lanes. And I dove in, and when I got to the halfway part, right before I got to the halfway part where you turn around, I looked up and thought, "Oh, I'm smoking everybody. What a walk in the park!" And I barely even swim ever. And I got to the midsection, and I turned around and I looked up, and everyone was out of the pool already.
Oh, that's like a traumatizing.
So I got out. And there was no walking off the court. You had to finish. So I was probably like 10, and I got back, and my mom was there because everyone was there with their parents, and she just looked at me and said, "So swimming's not your thing. Let's go get ice cream."
On to the next. That's good.
Yeah. But I alpine ski raced, and I played tennis. So those were kind of the two sports that I did the most.
Yeah, I knew that you were like a baller skier, and it's just so cool when I see people that can ski like you. It's just amazing.
Well, your body thanks you for not doing it, and your knees and back thank you.
So you're into the skiing. Were you into school? Were you a student? Like, did you qualify in your mind as a good student?
I was a good student. That was important to me and probably more important to my parents. So getting good grades was not getting good grades wasn't an option, or I would get my car keys taken away.
Yeah, it was all linked together, part of the deal.
Plus
what about your parents? Where are they from, and what were some of their kind of values that are clear in your mind as far as what was important to them?
My dad's family was from Germany, and my dad grew up in Bellevue actually, and grades were really important to him, and he was a doctor, so obviously it's important to get really good grades and if you want to become a doctor. So that was always really, really important to him. And then my mom was born and raised in Paris. So she came over to the United States after she met my dad when he was just like backpacking around Europe, and they got introduced. And
that's a cool story. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So her family's all from France. So
did you spend time there growing up?
Yeah. I spent during the summers when I was a kid, I would go over there pretty much every summer.
That's
and
so cool.
Visit with the family over there. And then, so they met over there and got married. And then my mom moved here. And so I kind of went back and forth, and I'm a dual citizen too.
I don't think I knew that either. That's very cool, especially in the world as it is right now, right? We all want dual citizenship.
Right. And it was really neat in grad school because I lived over there. So that was fun to get to spend a summer in Paris.
And you still have family there?
I do. Yeah. I have a few family members over there.
That's very cool. And so when you're like abroad and telling people about Seattle, is it like when you're describing it, as you mentioned, is it an idyllic place in your mind? Or do you think of places like New York and Chicago and San Francisco, like big LA, bigger cities? Do you still think of Seattle as like a small town or a big city?
I still think of it as a small town. Other people think of it as a major city. And that's probably the main difference is when you tell people you're from Seattle, if you tell people that you're from Seattle now, the reaction you get is very different than, 30 years ago when you told people that. Now it's always been an important city. Now it's a really, really important global city, obviously, because you have everything from Microsoft and Amazon.
Yeah.
Starbucks.
It's pretty unbelievable what's come out of this city. I mean, it's crazy.
People from overseas, they think about Nirvana and Jimi Hendrix and all these other Bruce Lee and all these amazing people that are from Seattle that we lay claim to.
Right. And when you were little growing up, did you want to be a doctor like your dad?
No, because I really don't like blood or guts or anything, needles. Nothing.
I don't like any of that either. I can't deal.
Yeah, I would.
What did you want to be?
A doctor. I actually wanted to be a lawyer, believe it or not.
You'd be good at that.
That was my plan. And then my uncle, who's a lawyer, talked me out of it, and I didn't have a good backup. So I had to go figure it out on my own.
So I know you went to UW. Like, was that 100% the plan all along? Like, this is where I want to go. I want to go in state, or how did that end up being the choice?
Because that was the place where my parents would pay for me to go. So it wasn't really much of an option.
So you're like, I'm going to UW, and
it was, if you go there, we'll pay for it. Otherwise, you have to figure out a way pay for it yourself. So I said, okay, well, that's not much of an choice. I'll just get it for free.
Yeah, it's near impossible to get in now. It's unbelievable how competitive it's become.
Yeah.
And so when you went originally, were you planning on pursuing, like, ultimately going back to law school after college?
Absolutely. That was absolutely my plan, was to go be a lawyer. And I had it all planned out. I wanted to be a defense attorney for malpractice against doctors. I was just all ready to go. And
how crazy that you were so clear on what you wanted to do and be. I had no idea. I was just taking classes that were like close enough to the sorority that I could like walk and be lazy.
No, I
what building is closest?
I thought I had it all figured out. And then some things happened and I got discouraged from going, and I decided that it wasn't for me.
What did you end up studying instead?
In undergrad, I studied psychology.
Yeah.
Which wasn't super helpful when I graduated. If you're not going, it doesn't matter what you study if you're going to law school, because you just have to take the LSAT. Yeah. But if you want to go into business and you don't have a business degree, it can be a challenge to get that first job.
Mm-hmm. And is that what you wanted to do? I know you went right into healthcare. Like, what did you think about, and how did your opportunities like open themselves to you?
I really have always liked technology a lot. So I kind of figured, and that was right at the beginning of the internet. So I assumed that I would end up working in technology, and that was something that I was just personally passionate about. And so I kind of created an opportunity for myself in my first job, helping the company get set up with the internet and email and just all the basic technology stuff. And so that was my first, I would say, real job. And ironically, it was sort of technology and healthcare, which was what my passion, which was like a personal passion area for me, especially if I wasn't going to go to law school. And then once I went to grad school, I still kept looking around for companies that I thought were at the intersection of healthcare and technology. And there just weren't any when I graduated, that I thought were interesting. And even the companies that were high flying healthcare internet companies, most of those companies went away because they had flawed business models.
And how did you know what you were doing? Were you self-taught? And how did you go about getting the job?
I mean, I basically just asked around, and anyone that would take a meeting with me, whether it was through a family or a friend, and anyone that I could get a meeting with, I would go try to get a meeting with. And ultimately for that first job, which, was a pretty junior job, was more just about finding some opportunities where I could add clear value and just say, here, like, what are some things that you need to have done? Okay, this, and this. Great, I'll do that.
And so what was the this, and this?
It was mainly taking a bunch of their data and helping them organize it so that they didn't have to rely on stacks and stacks of papers and fax machines and just, a really wasteful, antiquated model. When they saw that they could, bring a bunch of this stuff online, a lot of their systems and process online. And I certainly wasn't creating that software. It was literally me going and, getting them access to applications that can make their business run a little bit better. So I wasn't developing anything for them.
And how did you decide to go back to grad school? Is that a necessity? Did somebody say, like, this is important, or you felt like I need to take a break? How did you make that decision?
I felt like I could really benefit from grad school at that time in my life. They're, getting access to more education to supplement what I was already learning. And it also gave me access to incredible professors and an exposure to a bunch of areas that were really, really important for me to learn about. So it wasn't a break and it wasn't a requirement. It just felt like a good next step. And it, ironically, I ended up, not even, working in that area. I ended up just going straight into like data and advertising, but I don't regret it.
Yeah.
I mean,
and because you worked in healthcare a little bit after, and then eventually decided I want to go into tech.
Exactly.
Like tech, pure tech.
I just, being a management consultant was not for me. Like sitting in a windowless cube.
Some people that I talk to, I think some people also, they feel like it's like I'm kind of dipping in and dipping out, but I want to like have an operating role within something I'm building for myself. And I feel like just knowing your personality, I also kind of just think of you as an entrepreneur. I think some people are just meant to be an entrepreneur, like even if it wasn't a management consultant, I don't know if I could picture you in like working for someone else forever. I don't know.
I think it ebbs and flows. I think it really depends on if you're, I talk to people all the time that are trying to figure out whether they should start a company or stay at their existing role. And I think a lot of it's situational. Like, are you at a point in your life where you can go do that? Or is there something that's you just feel such a strong
pull. A
real pull to go solve a problem that you're like banging your head into every day or observing. But there are lots of roles inside big companies where you can go work with incredible people and solve really, really tough problems. I've worked at big companies too and had a lot of fun. So I think it really is more, I mean, at the end of the day, are you surrounded by people that you want to be working with every day?
Right. And you feel inspired.
Yeah. And if you can feel inspired and get that from a big company, then and feel ownership over a problem that you're solving, then it can share a lot of those attributes that makes running your own company fun.
Tell me about 2008 when you started BlueKai. You had two co-founders. How'd you come up with the idea? How'd you meet these guys?
I was at a company in Seattle, in Bellevue actually, that was in the advertising space, and I would get calls frequently from companies that just didn't want our software, didn't want to buy ads, didn't want to buy the software, and were struggling to find data online. And that was a really, really big problem because there was really no company that provided a clean, transparent marketplace for accessing data online separate from the media. If you were an advertiser or an agency, like an airline, for example, and you wanted to target people that were, shopping for plane tickets, and you wanted to show them an ad outside of Google, then you would go to, one of 100 different companies and you'd buy their definition of what someone in market for travel was. And it could have been someone that read an article with the word travel on it, or in it. And it might have had nothing to do with travel. And then there was a bunch of data that was being used improperly. And so we just, my co-founder and I both were seeing this problem, and we had worked together, and we decided this is a problem that no one's solving. And we think that, frankly, the data is more valuable than the media it runs on a lot of the time. Just like you might go buy, a ring, and then you might buy a diamond separately and put the diamond in the ring. And, that diamond's pretty valuable. Often you could argue more valuable than the ring that it's in. And so we felt like the data was being improperly used and undervalued. And what was happening is it was keeping a lot of the really good data on the sidelines or locked out of the advertising industry. So he and I got together and decided we were going to start that company. And then we brought on a third guy named Alex, who was an incredible product guy. And that was how we started the company. And at that time, everybody thought we were nuts just because the economy was not in a good place. And no one in the digital advertising world was used to buying data by itself. Everyone was just used to buying ads that had data in it. And so it took a lot of meetings and explaining to people why understanding the data that you're buying is so important. And interestingly, in the offline world, that's been happening for decades. Like you might, if you want to send a mailer out to somebody, whether you're Wells Fargo or a pizza place down the street, people are very, very focused on the data and who they're going to send a mailer to. And so we felt like that model was inevitably going to be the same model in digital advertising, and it eventually did become that model. So that is now obviously a critical part of how all advertisers advertise now online.
Oh yeah, it's huge. You guys were the biggest and first movers in the space.
And then what happened was a couple of years in, we started to have some companies come to us, some really large global brands say, hey, we really like the data, but we have all of our own data and we don't know how to manage our own data properly. Can we use your underlying software to help us make sense of our own data? And we said, sure, we can do that. So that was when we launched our second product, which was a data platform that helped companies manage their own data. So basically at the end, we had a platform that helped companies manage their own data. And then we had a marketplace where they could enhance their own data with external data.
What was the bigger part of the business, or the one that really propelled the growth? I would say that they were both really, really important. The software part of the business, so one was a software business and one was a data business. I think the software business was a SaaS business, and that I think they were both really important and they were complementary to each other. So I wouldn't say that one's more important. If you think about now, even today, companies really, really rely on data to make their businesses run and to understand analytics better, but they also need systems to manage their own data. So I think the two are super complementary. I wouldn't say that one's more important. I would say that they're both absolute requirements for businesses to. Yeah. Today it seems so yes, but it's unbelievable that people weren't doing this back then and that you guys had the vision for it. So tell me about your co-founder, your original friend, buddy from work, Omar, that you co-founded the company with. Did you kind of overthink that as far as well, what if we don't want the same things? And what if we don't, I guess, want to have the same end goal? Or what if we don't want to build the same thing? What was your vetting process? Because I feel like the co-founder thing can get so complicated. And it seems like it's just a great friendship and a great partnership.
It is. I'm really thankful for having met him. We're still incredibly close. We talk practically every day. But Omar and I worked together. He was, before we even started the company together, and he was a product and marketing, and he's also highly technical, and I was more on the partnership and relationship side. And so we had brought to market some ideas and worked really, really well together. I think the main reason why we worked so well together was there's just a 100% trust, and there always has been. And we earned that trust over getting to know each other for years, even before we started the company. And then when we started the company, I think if you're anchored in trust, then it allows you to make decisions very quickly. And And if they don't work, then that's okay. Not every decision that we didn't have to agree on every decision, and one of us wasn't always right. But I think I would say that there's just a lot of trust. And on top of that, we had a very, very almost identical vision for we were both seeing this issue before we started the company, and we each independently saw the problem. So we both had observed the problem, and we both thought about the solution to the problem the same way. We both had the same vision for where we wanted to take the company, and it was all on a real platform of trust between us. So
That's awesome.
and so I think we rarely did we fight. I think from a co-founder perspective, it's really hard to predict that sort of thing, but
right.
I'm very
you can't tell. How did you fund the business?
We were pretty lucky because the area that we were interested in, the problem that we were interested in solving wasn't a huge problem there, but there were investors like Chris Moore from Redpoint who believed he had funded this company, Right Media, that was the very first media exchange. And so he was convinced that the next big idea would be a data exchange for digital advertising. And serendipitously, he also knew who Omar was, and was trying to recruit Omar to go be a CEO of a Redpoint company. And so when we went to him and said, "Hey, we have this idea for a data exchange," he was like, "I've been waiting for this." So it was pretty fortunate alignment of the stars.
Yeah.
So Redpoint, we didn't do a seed round or anything like that. We just went straight into the Series A, and Redpoint's a fantastic firm, and Chris was an amazing partner and super involved from the very beginning in helping us with recruiting and all parts of the business. So I think we were fortunate in that we had really good financial backing right from the beginning. So we didn't have to spend much time, out running around, wasting time talking to 100 venture firms.
Yeah. So what was the business model? How did the company make money?
So we created an auction marketplace for data. So we went to companies that had really, really good data it might not be their primary business model, but they were either they didn't know how to monetize their data, or it was being monetized without their knowledge unfairly. So we said, "Hey, we can help you put your data in this marketplace and make sure that it's super transparent on what people are able to get and how they're able to use it." And we created a registry, so there was clear opt-out and privacy already built in the day we launched it. And so it was able to attract companies that had really, really good data that were worried about participating in the digital advertising system. So it was the first, I would say, set of guardrails that went around data usage, digital advertising, because it was sort of the Wild West before that. And so we put some process in place that allowed companies that were sitting on incredible data assets to get to participate in this economy on their own terms.
So it was an auction place. And then the other side of the business, the SaaS.
That was basically just software that companies would license. And that was that part of this is a software business, obviously, because it's their own data. So we're not going to sell them their own data. So we would license them software to help manage all of their data. And then if they want to license more data, they could do that.
And at what point did you and Omar and your team kind of come together and say, or was it organic to define your culture, your vision, your values, all of that part? And how did that play into your recruiting strategy?
Great question. We tried to, for the first 50 or so people, be super involved in every hire, regardless of whether it was an engineering hire or a sales hire or product hire or HR, finance. We really tried to either have Omar or me interview every single person. And that was one piece. And then we relied heavily on referrals, people that had worked with other people, just because it's so hard to tell on paper. But when you have someone that says, "Hey, I've worked with this person, she's great, we work together at XYZ company." So I would say those two pieces were pretty important. Everyone tries to define culture, but I would say that you end up, you try to get as much as you can right. And we, like every other company, made some hiring mistakes along the way that smart people, actually, really like smart people that weren't culturally a fit. Luckily, we didn't make too many of those. But every time that happened, I would remember that. And so I think at the end, it was a good market, a good job market, and there were a lot of talented people out there. And so the final filter, I think, that we settled on was we just didn't want to hire any jerks. So we didn't care how accomplished someone was. If we got the sense that the person was arrogant and going to, not help the company be better culturally, then we wouldn't hire them. And that's much easier said than done, because we had to pass on some super, super talented people. We just got a bad sense.
It's amazing how many people say, like, our one thing is, that they usually say assholes. It seems like that's the word people use, but no assholes. And I'm like, if I could crack the code on, you can have a gut reaction, right? Like, to me, I think it's important, especially at the higher levels, take somebody out to a restaurant, like, just see how they treat human beings, like the basics of like everything our parents taught us in kindergarten, like make eye contact, like please and thank you.
Totally. And on all levels. I remember, interviewing, people like CFOs, and I was shocked I was both relieved and shocked. Relieved that some of the people just made it so easy for me to tell, and shocked that they didn't try to hide it more.
Right. You're like, at least be on your best behavior. We're on a first date. Like, shouldn't this show up later?
It's super easy for me to pass.
Right. Yeah, completely. Yeah. Well, you guys ultimately sold the company to Oracle. Was that something you like put yourself out to the market, or they approached you? And how did that whole thing go down?
It's so funny, because we had other companies interested in acquiring the company all the way back to the very beginning, and we'd always said no. And as a matter of fact, Omar and I had just decided we're going to keep focused and try to go public. And we had hired Morgan Stanley, and they were giving us a bunch of guidance around, here's what you need to do for the year before you can file, and here are the milestones, and blah, blah, blah. And so we had just decided we were heads down, not going to get distracted, not going to take any of those types of calls. And then in the course of about a week, Oracle and a few other companies all just independently pinged us. And I don't know what was in the water, but it all happened at the same time. And it was compelling enough where we just called Morgan Stanley back and said, we think we may need to bring some of these offers to the board and have a discussion about them. And so we ended up, that sort of kicked off a process, and it ended up going down a path I don't think either of us expected, certainly not then. But it ended up being a great outcome for everybody.
And who was guiding you personally through all this? Because as CEO, a lot of this rests on your shoulders, and you're the business guy. And it sounds like Omar was the product and marketing guy, and the third co-founder was like tech engineering.
No, Omar was the CEO, and
he was the CEO, and you were.
Yeah, and I was the chief revenue officer. So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. I knew you were chief revenue officer. So who was up in those meetings, and like, how are you guys? Like, how do we know what we're doing? It's a big deal.
Yeah, we had, Omar and Alex and I think we're all in agreement that it was the right decision to at least explore that, those acquisition discussions. And then, our investors were super, super supportive. So I would say they gave us incredible support. A lot of investors wouldn't. A lot of investors are not thinking about the founders. And I think our investors really put themselves in our shoes and thought about us and in the market and were really supportive. So I don't know that it would have had that kind of outcome without their support either. They were great.
Yeah. It sounds like there was like, I don't know if it's just like not a fairy tale situation, but it sounds like you were just, at the end of the day, if I had to kind of summarize your experience there, it was about the people. Like, you just were surrounded by really amazing human beings. Obviously, great idea, great timing, all of it lined up. But your instincts around people served you well. Like, your gut on that part, I think you and Omar and your team has been great.
Yeah, and if you look at a bunch of the folks that were at BlueKai, they've sort of sprinkled around, and many of them are in really, really amazing roles at, they've gone everywhere, Google and Facebook and Snowflake and Amazon, and
Yeah.
had amazing careers since then. So
And how was the transition for you guys to Oracle, especially because as it's like your baby and you're transitioning the culture and the people and just the systems, everything. How was that experience?
it was a pretty big change, obviously, to go from being a relatively small company to being part of Oracle. They were really welcoming. This was their first. They were, at the time, Oracle wanted to make take an aggressive position into outside of traditional databases and into the marketing stack. And so they had, acquired an email company, and they felt like this was a very strategic area for them. So that gave us, I would say, outsized exposure inside of Oracle. And another really neat experience was they allowed Omar and I to start a global business unit. So we started the Oracle Data Cloud, which ended up being a really important part of the data ecosystem. And then we got to expand that business through, like, organically and inorganically, including a pretty significant acquisition. It ended up being several acquisitions, actually, for that division, for that business unit. So I'd say that, the parts that were challenging are probably not unique to us, just being, new inside of a company.
Yeah.
And learning all the systems. But I would say, on the whole, Oracle was pretty generous and allowed us to continue to build on that vision. So,
And when did you leave Oracle? And I guess some people have that mentality, and I think we're hitting that age where some people are just kind of like chilling. And knowing your DNA, you probably won't be chilling ever. But I think probably, maybe I thought you would be going down the route of mostly doing investing things and advisory things, and not necessarily taking on like full operating roles. Like, was there a part of you that was like, I'm going to force myself to take a big, huge, long break, but I just kind of can't?
I tried taking some breaks. I have tried taking some breaks along the way. And what I've found is I really like working with people that I like to be around, and I love technology. And so I think and I have done a fair amount of advisory and investment work, and I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of that. So even if I think the concept of like working versus not working is, that's sort of a pretty binary way of thinking about it.
Right.
I think from an operating, like being in an operating role versus not an operating role, that is pretty clear. But when I left Oracle, I decided that I wanted to learn about other industries and spend more time. I wanted to see if there was anything in healthcare that was interesting. So I basically helped a couple of different companies that range from healthcare all the way to logistics as like investors, advisors, and even some operating support. And then I ultimately ended up starting another company with a guy that worked for me at BlueKai. And that company, at the time, I wasn't an operator. We didn't raise any venture money. I basically funded it and was the investor, and he was the operator. And then I was going to go join it in an operating capacity, but then it got acquired by Liveramp. And so I ended up, as part of that, running that at Liveramp.
Yeah.
The whole process of getting back into the operating mode happened sort of pretty quickly.
Accidentally and quickly.
Yeah, kind of accidentally. And just sort of, I ended up falling into that situation again.
Yeah. I'm like, and there you are.
Yeah. Then now I'm back at it. Yeah.
And now here you are back at it again. So tell me about what you're doing these days, and also just seeing the trajectory and kind of the path that you've been on. I'm super curious when you're like in your happy place, or you're in kind of the mode of you and you're at your best. Is it those early days when the ideas are flowing? Is it like, I guess, everybody has their sweet spot of like, those were the days kind of thing. Yeah.
I'll answer the second question first. For me, it's fun when you see stuff start to click, even if it's it can be really early on, it can be later on, but when you're when you're hammering away at something and you start to see your idea snap into place, and you start to see customers or partners benefit, their businesses benefit from it, and they're getting real value from it. That's a pretty fun, for me, that's a pretty fun experience. And that radiates within an organization. I mean, I don't care what division you're in at a company, when you see, an email, like an internal email that describes how the product or the work that everyone's doing is really, really having a real impact, not just at a company, but maybe on an industry. That's pretty special. And people get really, really excited. And so it's this snowball effect. So I like when I start to see that what I'm doing is having an impact. And then I like to see that impact on the people at the company, and it makes them more excited. And it's probably an overused analogy, but it's probably a little bit like, a baseball team that, once they start clicking and winning games, then it can become it can take on a life of its own. So.
100%. Yeah. I love that. I've never actually, I don't ask that question all the time, but I'm always curious about it. And I've never had somebody answer it that way. And it makes perfect sense. And it gives me energy just thinking about it.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And so tell me about what you're doing now.
So right now, continuing to do some investing in some advisory work. I'm on the board of two companies that I love. One is Omar, my BlueKai co-founder. He has an AI company, and it's incredible. They're working on some really interesting ideas around advertising, and in particular in video. And then I'm also on the board of a connected TV company called Mountain. It's a little bit like AdWords for connected TV. So it's performance marketing. And that company is they're both amazing founders, and I love working with them, and I love their teams, and I love the problems they're solving. So I'm doing that. And then I recently invested in a data company and became CEO of that last year. And that's been a lot of fun. So it's a data company that's been around for a while, but pretty under the radar. They never raised any money, and they weren't really doing a lot in digital or cloud, but they have incredible assets and people and data. And so I'm helping them expand into digital in the cloud. And I think that'll be a pretty interesting company to watch too.
What does the company do exactly? I mean, I read about it, and it sounds like a very cool company, by the way.
Yeah, so the company has a couple different components. So there's a data piece where they have incredible data at the business and household level. So that if people want to reach their customers, they can reach them in a clean and transparent way. It's in the data space, no big surprise that I've been in.
It's like data, schmata.
Yeah.
It's all about the data.
A lot of the companies, at least in marketing, either don't have access to great data, or they don't know how to use data, or there aren't mechanisms for them to use data in the way that they want to use it. So we're helping try to address some of those issues that have been pretty painful for companies over the last several years.
We've always looked at data. We look at things, in recruiting, like submittals to interviews to offers to acceptances, like the metrics are more. And then we look at data around, the types of target candidates. And obviously there's lots. But to me, the more I dig into it, the more I'm like, this is it almost feels addicting. Like it feels like, where is the beginning and the end of data? You do know what I mean? I don't know if that's a weird question, but it's like, we can get stuck in meetings where I'm like, okay, guys, I got to call Uncle here. We can't keep, it's like, where do we even stop tracking data?
Yeah, it's a really bizarre problem, because more data is being created now than ever before. And it's being created in all these new areas. And so it's basically a broken fire hose of data. So on the one hand, you have more data than you've ever had before. And then on the other hand, it's hard to get that data into a place where you can analyze it and start to make decisions. It can be very, very overwhelming.
100%.
People. And so that's one of the reasons why I like this company is we think we can help companies enhance their own data and get access to data that helps them make decisions and helps them communicate better with their customers.
I
And also,
read that you have some partners like obviously like Oracle and Meta.
yeah,
What are some examples of ways that these companies are utilizing your business? Like how are they partnering with you?
they can work with us in both offline and online, so we can help them with their data, or if they need data in anything from direct mail all the way through connected television.
Mm,
But for example, with Meta, they advertisers have to bring their own data to Meta. I mean, Meta has data, but advertisers, if they want to bring their own data to Meta, a lot of them choose to bring their own data that is outside of the data that Meta has. And so we have an integration with Meta that allows them to access and port data over to Meta or Facebook. And it's really, really easy to use and self-service. And that integration and getting that data into Meta can be a real challenge. And especially for the kind of the middle market,
mhm.
companies oftentimes don't get, like the SMB market, don't get a lot of resources. And so
Yeah.
they can, we have thousands of customers now that are using that. And it's a completely self-serve platform. So they can just log in and upload their data or access data and make it available as part of their Facebook campaign. And that's one example. And there's also companies that want to use data for analytics to better understand their own customer base, create a 360 view of their customer. So there are lots of different ways the data can get used.
Super cool.
And it just kind of depends on if you're an advertiser and you want to enhance your own, customer profile store, or if you're a company that sells ads and you need data to make those ad products more enrich those ad products. So just, it depends. And frankly, there are use cases that have nothing to do with advertising too. So cloud applications and other types of digital applications that can use data that are beyond just advertising. So the data doesn't really care where it's being used, as long as it's, used in a compliant way, and you're well within the guardrails of how and where data should get used. We're pretty careful about that.
Yeah, that's an area that you probably know everything about and I don't know a ton about. Is that changing, and is that something that's like heavily regulated?
It's changing all the time, and it's the folks that sort of wait around for the changes to happen, I think are that's not the best strategy. The way I look at data is there are things that you can do, there are things that you can't do, and there are things that you shouldn't do. And to me, there's no difference between what you shouldn't do and what you cannot do. To me, they're the same.
Yeah.
So you don't want to wait around for legislation to tell you that you're doing something that you shouldn't do. You should just not do that out of the gate.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you're like, my business is pretty simple. It's like recruiting, but you're like, oh, I'm in data, blah, blah, blah. And I would imagine at like a cocktail party, or if you're talking to Naomi and her friends, that they're kind of like, wait, in one ear, out the other. Sometimes it just kind of, all these companies that talk about data kind of blend together. Mm-hmm. How would you generally explain, this might be a weird question, I guess. If you're talking to Naomi, who's your daughter,
right,
and you're just talking to her about data and how people can use it, how would you generally explain to her why it's important and how companies what the ROI is from looking at data? And then also, if I'm a person listening and I own a company, how do I even know where to begin to look at my data?
I mean, I might even, if I were explaining it to Naomi and you were there, I might even just use your company as an example. So you have.
So I'm getting like free advice right now. This is amazing. Well, I led you into this, Grant.
Here we go.
This is perfect. Here we go.
When it comes to using data, for example, in marketing purposes, so you have a recruiting firm and you want to reach certain types of potentially either prospects or business decision makers, you have earned media and paid media. So you might have, an email list that you use to target people that are either have been prospects of yours or customers in the past, to tell them about, you just hired a woman to run your pharma practice, right? Or your IT, a new practice area for you. And or an aerospace practice, whatever new practice you're launching, and you've hired this new person, you want to get the word out. So you might send an email campaign out, and you might, put some information up on your site about it. But then you might also want to do some paid media, and that could be everything from really targeted, you might have a cocktail party and you want to send out really nice invitations to certain businesses and within a certain region. So you might buy a list of B2B decision makers at firms where you feel like they would be great at the decision makers. That's data that you can go license. And you might also have a seminar online to talk about the importance of hiring and learning and your approach in certain areas, especially, for example, like in aerospace or whatever new area you're launching. And you might have a webinar. And so you might have in addition to an email, you might do a targeted online campaign where you want to reach those same people or different people. And that's all data that you can go get. And that's not necessarily easy data to get. There are different places where you can get access to that type of data, ours being one of them. So those are just some examples. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So that's from the perspective of marketing.
Yeah.
But people are using data for like literally everything. And so as it's being regulated, and if I want to understand how it's being regulated, where do I look? How do I understand it? What should I be reading about?
Another example, and I'll get to that in a second. Another example would be in like a non-marketing use cases. You might have two giant companies. You might have like a Costco or a Walmart, and they may, they partner with Unilever, and they may want to share data with each other, and they might each put data into a clean room, and that data needs to be clean. And then maybe it gets merged inside that clean room for, joint marketing purposes, so that they could do some stuff together. So there would be whole hygiene and enhancement of the data outside of any kind of marketing related use case or for analytics. And so they might need a system for merging that data and performing hygiene on that data, enhancing that data. So those are other examples.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, switching gears, because otherwise I'm going to talk to you all day long. How are you feeling just generally about the economy and investing and opportunities right now in the tech space?
I'm concerned about the economy. I'm pretty concerned about the economy, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I would imagine that we had a really, really good run over a decade of crazy growth. So I'm not surprised that it's corrected itself. The question is how long. You'll have to have one of your economist friends come on and tell us how long that'll be. But I would be shocked if that doesn't continue at least for the next 18 months or 24 months. But I think that I'm hopeful that the public markets, the IPO market, will start to open up again. From an investing perspective, the entrepreneurs that I like are the ones that don't try to time things and just are passionate about going and building amazing technology to go solve problems. And they don't sit around, wondering, they don't think too much about the economy. They're just focused on solving the problem, because generally the problem they're solving is a problem that's been around for a long time or will be around for a long time. I mean,
right.
if I had worried about the economy and starting a company during, a good economy or a bad economy, I never would have started BlueKai. Couldn't have started in a worse economy. And you can't time everything. So, it's just like anything else in life. If you want to go do something, then
you just got to get up and go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I still invest. I try to invest in companies that I can get passionate about and also have some value to add to the company.
So when you're working, you're investing, you got the dad thing going on, you're crazy busy. How are you able to, I guess, keep your mental health strong, your physical health strong? What are you doing to unwind and just kind of chill out?
I should exercise more. That's the most important thing. I try to walk I try to, I mean, it sounds silly, but I try to do the 10,000 steps.
That's not silly at all. There's like
Yeah.
all this longevity stuff. Like it's all about the steps and the sleep and the blah, blah.
Yeah. So I try to focus on, I try is the key word to get the right amount of sleep. And I try to, to walk a lot. Obviously, any additional activity like skiing or tennis or sports or pickleball or whatever people are playing now is just another added bonus. But I think little things matter. So for example, if you just do a couple of phone calls that aren't Zoom calls, if you can, just walking, if you don't need to be in front of a computer looking at numbers or something like that, a couple of those a day can really, I find, have a lot of positive impact for me.
Yeah, that's smart.
And I do think the mental health problem is impacting, it's certainly impacting everyone, like directly or indirectly. I don't know a single person that isn't impacted by it. And
I agree. It comes up all the time in conversations. And yeah, I mean, the numbers, the statistics show everybody's more stressed, more anxious. I mean, the pandemic didn't help, and just the world and where we are is like crazy town.
Totally. The world and everything going around us, it just feels like
it's a nutty moment right now. So I'm not surprised to learn that you're doing stuff to take care of yourself, because I always think of you as being pretty balanced. But what would I be, I guess, surprised to learn about you, or what our listeners would be surprised to learn about you?
Gosh, it's a good question.
Don't throw me off too much. I'm like, should I be scared?
No. I wish I had something that was interesting. I probably, the biggest thing for me, and this wouldn't surprise our listeners, but it probably would surprise you, is post-COVID, the amount of travel I've done. I used to be on a plane every single week practically, and my travel has pretty much ground to a halt. And that probably, I mean, I was in New York last week, and I'm actually going to LA this week, so I feel like it's still starting to pick up. But that I haven't, I don't feel like, at least for me and for a lot of people I know, that the travel piece, it's just starting to turn on again. But I don't know if the amount of travel and the way companies look at travel, like this whole, whether it's travel or like being in the office, I don't feel like there's a clear answer for that yet. That is it's certainly not a one size fits all. And that's something that I'm noticing for myself. If I don't need to, I used to, I think, just travel a lot more. And so I'm traveling less now. And I also think that people underestimate the muscle and the fortitude it requires to travel a lot. I know that for me, you sort of have that travel muscle, and mine is not what it used to be. And I don't know if it's just because I'm older, but that's something that I surprises a lot of people that know me, just because I used to travel all the time. And now I'm just traveling a lot less.
Yeah, just get into like a mindset.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you're thinking about, like what's top of mind right now as far as like ambition, and then what's top of mind right now as far as like fear?
I try to not, I would say that I need to do a better job of not being as fearful of the things I don't control, but I'm not very good at that. I still worry. I mean, there's a lot way outside of business that I'm worried about that I try to not dwell on too much, or to the extent that I can have an impact in my own small way that I would like to. I think I forgot what the first question was. Oh,
ambition. Like, what are you thinking? Like, I feel like, both of us were at the same age, and every year that passes, I'm a little bit like, this is the year I don't even know what, I have stupid things in my mind, and then it's like another year is gone. And it might be an ambition, and they kind of waffle, but it could be something like do a triathlon, or something physical, or something spiritual, or something, business wise. Are you a person who's setting goals or thinking about ambitions outside of business?
Yeah, I definitely want to spend more time doing some of the things that I enjoy personally doing. So for example, we talked a little bit about, I think, bucket list, like going to Wimbledon or going to the French Open. Like I would love to spend, I'd love to go watch Wimbledon and go watch the French Open, and go watch the Hahnenkamm in Switzerland, and just, there are a bunch of events that would be great for the family to go see, and just a lot of fun in different parts of the world. That's one thing that each year that ticks off, I sort of say, oh, the next year I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yes, 100%.
So I need to do that. And then also just try to remember to stay healthy and I think we can, I mean, most people can do more. I'm certainly in that category. I can always be doing a lot more to help with my wellness and my health. And that obviously translates to your mental health to some extent too. So I'd like to start getting a little bit more of a routine and really just focusing on that. But I think I do an okay job, but I could do a lot better.
It's so hard. I've been saying for years, like, okay, I'm going to start meditating. I even have like things that go off that say time to meditate. I hit delete and I start checking my email.
I know. Well,
It's insane.
we're getting older, and people, unfortunately, we're at that age now where you start to see people
Getting sick. I know.
It's much easier the best way to deal with a problem is to avoid the problem in the first place.
Yeah. I'll start to be your accountability person. I'll text you random things like, let's go. Time to meditate.
Totally.
No, I'm 100% with you. Okay. My final question for you, you've given me so much time. I'm so grateful, is what fuels you?
People, being around people that inspire me. That's probably the number one. My daughter inspires me. Definitely people by far.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.